This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Today, a special on Kids for Cash. The shocking story of how thousands of children in Pennsylvania were jailed by two corrupt judges who received kickbacks from the builders and owners of private prison facilities.
I was known for being the jokester.
Eddie, he was always a fireball.
We were talking about how funny it would be if we made a fake MySpace page about my vice principal.
I was trying to stay out of trouble. That's when everything started.
Whatever sins you have committed, you can't go back and undo it.
Chiavarella was a no-nonsense, zero-tolerance judge. He always jailed kids.
You are going to experience prison. I'll be glad to put you there.
The way Chiavarella ran the courtroom, you could have had F. Lee Bailey there, and the kids would have gone away.
There's a mechanism that takes over that keeps kids in that system.
No one listened because we were kids.
There was never any instance of guilt or innocence. They were locking him up.
A really high number of kids appearing without counsel.
We have no rights. He's in their custody now.
It is unbelievable. We're talking about children.
I wanted them to be scared out of their minds. I don't understand how that was a bad thing.
Former Luzerne County judge faces charges tonight
In a scandal known as Kids for Cash.
$2.6 million
In return for sentencing kids to juvenile detention.
I never sent a kid away for a penny.
I'm not this mad judge who was just putting them in shackles, throwing kids away.
He went there as a free-spirited kid. He came out a hardened man, I would say.
Here I was saying we can trust that judge to be fair. That's not what happened. I was scared every day.
I was only 14. All those years I missed.
This is not a cash for kids case.
This is not bad! You ruined my life! I still wake up from nightmares.
That's the trailer for Kids for Cash, a new documentary years in the making, features interviews with the children, with the parents, and two judges at the heart of the scandal. The film is set to open in Philadelphia Wednesday at the Kimmel Center for the Performing Arts. Well, on Monday, I spoke to a number of people featured in the film, including Charlie Balasavage and Hilary Transu. They were both 14 years old when they were sentenced to juvenile detention. I began the interview with Hilary Transu and her mother, Lorene. Hilary was sent to juvenile detention after she created a MySpace page mocking her assistant high school principal. Her mother, Lorene, called the Juvenile Law Center in Philadelphia for help and sparked an investigation that exposed the Kids for Cash scandal. I asked Hilary how it all began.
I believe it was 2007. When I was on the phone with a friend, and we were just chatting, and I heard a call from the bottom of the stairs. My mother sounded irate, and she yelled up to me, "Do you know anything about a MySpace page?" And I said, "Yeah, from like months ago."
How old were you?
I was 15.
What was this MySpace page?
It was a parody page about my vice principal. A couple of friends and I decided it would be funny to make fun of the school disciplinarian on the internet. And so we created this page, and I remember putting a disclaimer on it thinking, if anybody finds this, at least I can't get in trouble for it.
And you said things like, you talked about her and said she spends most of her time reading silly teen magazines, daydreaming about Johnny Depp and nothing but tidy whities, ooh la la.
Yes. Yes.
And so this was what your mother was yelling up to you about?
Yes. I mean, there were comments on there made by other kids that were not, that were obscene, and I will admit to that. But they were not my comments. I think I was held responsible for them because they were on the page. And,
so what happened?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is on my mom's end. She was on the phone with the police officer, and I didn't really understand what was going on.
Lorene, can you tell us what happened with this phone call?
The officer called, asked me if Hillary is my daughter. I said yes. He said, well, I'm coming down to her, arrest her
for making a MySpace page about her vice principal. So I yelled up to Hillary, do you know anything about a MySpace page and your assistant principal? And she's like, yeah, from like months ago. At which point the officer started shouting. I heard her. She confessed. I'm coming down there. I'm arresting her. And I'm like, whoa, you're not speaking to my daughter without an attorney. At least give me time to get an attorney. And he started shouting that that's how parents like me are. We let our kids off the hook. And because I was getting attorneys involved, he was going to charge her with internet stalking, abuse of the internet. He told me that they've been watching my internet activity and that he was coming down to arrest her. So
what about the lawyer for your daughter?
Well, I got off the phone and I'm like, now I'm thinking, where am I going to find a lawyer at this time of night? And like,
What time was it?
It was after I had come home from work, so it was in the evening, and I don't know any lawyers. We're not the kind of folks that have a lawyer on retainer. So I called my mom, and I said, do you know an attorney? And she's like, well, I do, but, like, not for this, and you're overreacting. Sounds like a very simple thing that happened. Call the officer back and try and talk to him. Just, follow the law, be cooperative. I'm like, okay. So I called the officer back, and he said, hey, you keep the lawyers out of it, and I'll reduce her charges to a misdemeanor of harassment. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, we can do that. What, are you still coming down? Can you wait till, I have at least someone here while you arrest her or whatever? And he said, oh, no, I don't have to come down. We'll send you something in the mail. And then that was in January, and we didn't hear anything for months. In fact, I kept calling him saying, we haven't received anything.
So when did you hear and what happened?
We did get a paper in the mail. We had to go to juvenile probation. We had to do an interview there, bring all of her shot records, birth certificate, all that kind of thing, our financial information. They asked us some very intimate questions, which was odd.
You have no lawyer?
No, no lawyer. Again, I was told keep the lawyer out of it and everything will go simply, and we asked the probation officer what's going to happen now, and he said, well, it'll probably be probation and possibly community service. Okay, do we get a lawyer? Like, no, that, we've done the study, you'll go to court, whatever. Okay. So then we went to court, and we walked in, and they had tables set up by last name. And we went to the table there, and they said, do you have an attorney with you? And I said, no. They said, sign here. So now I'm assuming, oh, this is where we get a public defender. And so I signed this blank form and signed. But you also have to understand that there were dozens of other parents there with their children at their last name table doing the same exact thing. So I'm like, okay, this is how it works. Then we went in a big room and we waited, and we thought the attorneys would meet us there. No one came. They said, we're going to the courtroom. We sat right outside the courtroom. No attorneys came. The prosecutor came out. The assistant principal was there. She gave him a kiss on both cheeks, asked him how the family was, and he said, don't worry about a thing. And we walked into the courtroom. They said, this is the case of, and the judge stood up and started screaming at Hillary.
The judge was?
Mark Chivarella, former judge.
What was he screaming at you, Hillary?
The first thing he said to me was, what makes you think you can do this kind of crap? And it was really off-putting. I was there that day in my mother's clothing because she insisted that I look nice, and at 15 years old I didn't have anything appropriate. And I'm already uncomfortable, and he started, screaming at me, what makes you think you can do this kind of crap? And I was just terrified. I've never been before a judge before, and I wasn't expecting to be screamed at by one. So it definitely was jarring.
And what happened?
It took about 30 seconds, so it's hard for me to have exact details. But he said something along the lines of adjudicated delinquent, which meant nothing to me. And then I remember my mother's hands leaving my shoulders, and I remember gliding as if in like a dreamlike sort of state to this back room where all I can hear is the sound of my mother's pleading, her wailing and pleading, and I'm being cuffed, and the bailiff is saying, yes. And the bailiff says, look what you did to your mother. And it just, like I said, it sort of like time stopped, and I began to veer off to this like parallel universe.
Lorraine, did the judge hand down a sentence right there?
Oh, yes. He said adjudicated delinquent, and he said send her up to FACT. That'll for her to think about what she's done. And I just started, I looked at the officer, and I'm like, but that's not what you said. And I'm like looking at these people who have said, you know, it'll be probation, possibly community service, and I'm thinking, this is crazy, because I had called, in Pennsylvania we have magistrates, and I asked, you know, my daughter's been accused with this statute of Pennsylvania law. I said, as an adult, what would be the maximum sentence? 1 night in jail and up to a $50 fine. So why on earth would I think they would take my daughter, who's never been in trouble? We had no family issues. We were not involved with the system in any way. Why would I think they would take my daughter away? So basically, I started, you know, asking him, and then I just started, I became hysterical. This is the best way I can explain it.
You saw your daughter handcuffed?
No, she was like, it was very odd because my hands were on her shoulders, and as soon as he said adjudicated delinquent, I really didn't hear anything else. I had been a caseworker for 16 years, and I knew exactly what that meant. So I turned and was talking to them, and when I turned again, it was like she had evaporated. She was just gone.
I wanted to turn to our other guests in studio right now. Charlie Balasavage, talk about what happened to you. So Hillary was 15. How old were you when police first came to your house?
I was 14.
How old are you now?
I'm 23.
So you're 14 years old and the police came over?
Yes.
Why?
At first, I thought it would be because I was riding this scooter around without a helmet on because, you know, and ended up it wasn't that. It was that someone had called, reported that scooter stolen.
Where did you get the scooter?
My parents bought it off of a family member.
They bought it for you?
Yeah, they bought it for me. So my parents weren't home at the time, so I had to call them. They rushed home, and the
police were there?
Yeah, the police were there. The cops arrested all three of us and took us down to the police station, and we had to write a statement and everything. We told them what happened, that we bought it, and they said, unfortunately, because we didn't have no documentation saying that they bought it from my family member, that they're going to have to charge with receiving stolen property. And so they said to my parents, you know, if I take the charges, maybe I'll get probation, maybe not even, just community service. So I agreed to it. I was like, okay, you know, I'll do that, because otherwise my parents were going to get charged with it.
Did you have a lawyer with you?
No, no lawyer. This was all the cops' suggestion, too, that I take the charges, nothing will happen, you know. And so I was like, okay, and I ended up having to go into court. And when I went into court, it was the same thing. You walk up to that table, they have that form.
Your mom was with you?
Yeah, my mom was with me. She signed it. We didn't have a lawyer at all. We thought also we'd get a public defender. That's not what happened. We walked into the courtroom. We were literally in there for maybe a minute. And the judge already knew what he was going to do with me. I mean,
this judge was named?
Sherrill. And I really don't even remember what he said clearly that I have a behavior problem because I had a speech impediment when I was younger, and because of it I was made fun of a lot in school. So I had a problem going to school, and he had records of that. So that was my big problem. He sentenced me to 3 months in a Camp Adams.
Camp Adams?
Yeah, Camp Adams.
It's called Camp Adams?
Yeah. It's like a boot camp, pretty much.
Had you ever been detained before?
No.
Did you know where you were going?
No. They shackled me right there in front of my mother and hauled me off.
And how long did you serve in jail?
It was the 3 months I had to do in Camp Adams, then they do a follow-up where I have to go back to court. And when I went back to court, I ended up having to go to a place called Clearbrook for 3 months because I experimented with marijuana. And I was truthful with them and told them that, yeah, I tried it before. So apparently I had a drug problem at that time. So they made me do another 3 months there. When you first went to jail, you talk in the film Cash for Kids about having to earn a pillow. Oh yeah, that was from my first 2 weeks at Camp Adams. They have like a system. Your first 30 days there, it's called like a ranger. You do nothing but like physical training and stuff like that. And yeah, every time I would ask for a pillow, no one would ever get me one. And finally, once I moved past that ranger stage, they move you to a different cabin. I finally got a pillow. So ultimately, how long did you serve in prison? Altogether, it was about 5 years. 5 years? Yeah. How did you end up in jail for 5 years on and off? Probation violations. So you would get out? Yeah, I would get out. I would not go to school or something. How did jail affect you? I mean, I was in there with people that actually belong there. That I've heard things, and like I guess I could say I was influenced. I mean, by these people. Even staff would say to me, "Well, what are you doing here? Why are you here?" And I said, "I don't know." That was Charlie Balasavage, one of thousands of children convicted in the Kids for Cash scandal in Pennsylvania. We also heard from Hillary Transu and her mom, Lorene. All three are featured in the new documentary Kids for Cash that's premiering in Philadelphia Wednesday night, looking at how two judges, Mark Ciavarella and Michael Conahan, took kickbacks from private prisons. In our next segment, we'll speak with Sandy Fanzo. Her son, Ed, is not with her. You'll find out why. We'll be back in a minute.